Hey everyone, welcome to the first ever edition of A Lifetime of Wrestling. I've been a wrestling fan now a long time, and this is going to be a rustic wrestling podcast each and every episode. I'm going to pick a topic or a certain wrestler in wrestling history, talk to you guys about it from my point of view, with my own thoughts and feelings of it, from when I was a child, a teen, a young adult, and older adult as I am right now. Before I do that, I plan to release one episode a week. Who knows, maybe two once in a while. We'll see how things go. I'm going to start with my first episode to talk about one of my favorites growing up, the total package, Lex Luger. This episode here will be pretty much going through his whole career, and how we can see how, I just got to tell you, this man deserved a lot more in wrestling. Deserved a lot more good to happen to him than did. Start and stop pushes, so close to being the world champion. At times that he should have been, and we're going to talk about that. But first, let's start where it all began. Back in 1985, Larry Fole, his real name, former CFL, NFL football player out of college, starting off in Championship Wrestling of Florida. Now, when he debuted, he, as you all know, had quite the muscular body. Now, this is a time where Hulk Hogan and Hulkamania is running wild in the WWF, and you think a lot of promotions, especially under the National Wrestling Alliance banner, were seeing what was going on. And, you had Ric Flair running the roost in the NWA. That was their main guy with Dusty Rhodes. And, at the time, you still had the Harley races going on. So, very different contrast from Hulk Hogan. But Lex Luger wasn't the first muscular guy in wrestling, of course. However, he debuted, and you gotta admit, having a name like Lex Luger in itself, what an awesome name. Obviously, the first thought you would have would be Lex Luthor from DC Comics, obviously, but, a slight change from Luthor to Luger, which is a gun. And I remember going through the pages of Pro Wrestling Illustrated when I was a kid, first hearing about him and seeing that name, and that name grabs you like a Ric Flair, like a Hulk Hogan. Lex Luger, just rolls off the tongue so well. Strong name. And then when you look at pictures of him, me as a kid at that time and a Hulkamaniac, of course, I saw the pictures, and I'm like, wow, this guy is so awesome. He looks, he's cool, he's muscular, obviously, right? So, and again, I didn't have Florida TV. I mean, I'm from Alberta, Canada, so I only had so much wrestling on TV that I could watch. But man, those monthly after magazines, Pro Wrestling Illustrated, Inside Wrestling, The Wrestler, to name a few, that opened my world so much to realize, because I grew up thinking it was only WWF, and we had Stampede Wrestling too. But to first open a magazine and seeing, these other territory names and other wrestlers' names, and I'm reading articles telling me that Ric Flair is the best wrestler in the world, and I'm like, no way, it's Hulk Hogan. Who is this guy? But then as you get more and more magazines, and God bless my mother for always picking some up for me, and then I learned so much. But then, back to Lex Luger, I read about him, how he's the next Hulk Hogan, right? And, after spending some time in Florida there, trained by Hiro Matsuda, winning the Southern Heavyweight Championship, I believe, within 19 days of his debut, defeating Wahoo McDaniel, you had to realize that there was big plans for this guy. And clearly Jim Crockett, owner of Jim Crockett Promotions, Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, of course, holder of the TBS World Championship Wrestling contract there, from all we've ever heard is he took note of these huge articles and signed him up to a high-paying contract right away, as quick as they could, debuting in Jim Crockett Promotions in early 1987, already mingling with the Four Horsemen, Ric Flair, Tully Blanchard, and Ole and Arn Anderson. And soon after his debut with Crockett, where he was announced as a Horseman associate, led to the ring by J.J. Dillon for a few of his first matches, they ran a storyline where Ole Anderson had been MIA with the Horsemen, and when he came back, apologizing for his absence as he was looking or going to his son's, if I'm not mistaken, his wrestling, collegiate wrestling events, and which led to the storyline where Tully Blanchard did not take kindly to that, leading to a breakup where Ole Anderson was kicked out of the Horsemen, and who takes that spot? None other than the total package, Lex Luger. Now imagine, this guy had only debuted some 15 months prior to that in pro wrestling. And here he is already a member of the Four Horsemen, who had been running roughshod there in Crockett Promotions since the latter part of 1985. So this is early 1987. This is going on. Lex Luger, a member of the Four Horsemen already. A fantastic name. An amazing physical specimen. Like, what a body this guy had. Like, and so here we are. And one of his first feuds as a Horseman would be with Nikita Koloff, who at the time, the Russian Nightmare, was the U.S. heavyweight champion. The number 2 championship in Crockett Promotions, of course, were right under the NWA World Championship held by Ric Flair. And by July, in a steel cage match in Greensboro, North Carolina, with a little bit of help from J.J. Dillon, of course, Lex Luger defeats Nikita Koloff to become the U.S. heavyweight champion. Already, like the number 2 guy. Not the number 2 guy, but the number 2 championship, like a championship that was held by Ricky Steamboat, Magnum TA, Tully Blanchard, to name a few. So Lex Luger, the number 2 guy in the Horsemen now, and just doing fantastically, like living up to this hype that Pro Wrestling Illustrated and the After magazines were bestowing upon him really early, and going through those few months, those summer months from July, title defenses, part of the first ever War Games match right before winning the U.S. title. So here he is. He defeats Nikita Koloff. He's the U.S. heavyweight champion. And this is July 87. And shortly thereafter, starting a storyline, a feud with the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, the head guy in Crockett Promotions, the booker, the top babyface, the team captain there. And now, Lex Luger was never a whiz in the ring, but this guy was good. He played his role well. For a muscular guy, he moved around very quickly. Gets into that feud with Dusty Rhodes, which is leading up to a big match at Starrcade 87. And this was the first Starrcade, of course, as we all know, that was not held in the Carolinas. They held it in Chicago, and which angered a lot of long-time traditional Jim Crockett Promotions fans. However, Lex Luger going into that match against Dusty Rhodes, if I'm not mistaken, Rhodes stipulated that he would quit if he couldn't win the title during the match. Much like how Luger won the U.S. title, J.J. Dillon throws a chair into the ring to help Lex to use it, of course. So Lex bends over to pick up that chair, but Dusty jumps right up and DDTs him right on that chair, pinning him to win the U.S. championship. The first time ever for Dusty Rhodes actually being U.S. heavyweight champion. This led to an interview a few days later on TV where Lex Luger, standing for himself, he praised Dusty Rhodes, proclaimed himself still the future of pro wrestling. But you can see in the background J.J. Dillon raising his eyebrow at him, almost like, what the hell are you talking about? Lex Luger was starting to stand on his own here, letting the world know that he is the future of wrestling. But of course, when you're in a group with Ric Flair as the leader, that's a no-no to say something like that, of course, right? But that was leading to late December in a battle royal in Miami where Lex Luger and J.J. Dillon were the final two. And of course, this was a battle royal to where the winners would become entrants into the big Bunkhouse Stampede final in January of 1988. Now, J.J. Dillon in the match, at the end, of course, expected Lex Luger to voluntarily eliminate himself over the ropes so that J.J. would become the winner. But no, Lex was now a man on his own. He turns on J.J., eliminates him, wins the match. The other horsemen are furious. And this was the official babyface turn. And now, as a fan, we're all ready to see Lex Luger become what these magazines were saying he was going to be. The guy, the best guy, the biggest guy, the new Hulk Hogan. And he looked great, as we all know. So through January, feuding a bit with Blanchard and Anderson, culminating in March's Clash of the Champions, the first ever Clash of the Champions live on TBS the same day at the same time as WWF's WrestleMania 4 on pay-per-view. Lex Luger and Barry Windham defeat Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson of the Horsemen to win the World Tag Team Championship. Now, there was only about 5,000 to 6,000 fans at the Greensboro Coliseum for this, but that roar when they won that match was amazing. And you can see it starting like this, the Lex Luger era. Him and Barry Windham winning the tag team title, going on TV for a couple weeks, and Luger is in his glory. He is gloating, winning these championships with Barry on interviews, taking his shirt off. He would say, I can't help it. I just got to take my shirt off. I've got to pose, he would say. And things were looking great, but remember, he left the Horsemen, and there was still a gap on the Horsemen. And even Flair would overtly say in interviews, hey, Barry Windham, you'd look good in the Horsemen. Leading to a rematch about a month after them winning the tag team title, Luger and Windham against Blanchard and Anderson on World Championship Wrestling. And during that match, almost out of nowhere, Barry Windham turns on Luger. Turns on him, clotheslines him, leaves him for dead. Luger gets pinned. Blanchard and Anderson win the tag team title back. Windham joins the Horsemen. Now Luger, he never really, which was kind of weird because Windham turns on Luger right there in March, but they almost don't even do much of a mention of that again. Like Luger doesn't even go on like a little short few-month feud with Windham. They immediately shift him into a world title program with Ric Flair. Now July would be the first ever Great American Bash on pay-per-view at July of 88. So here it was. The stage was set. Flair versus Luger for the NWA World title. We get to that match. And as you all know, late in the match, Lex Luger does a blade job. It's not really bleeding a whole lot. I guess he didn't blade himself very well, but he gets Flair up into the torture rack backbreaker. 14,000 fans sold out the Baltimore Arena. They are screaming in anticipation. The ref calls for the bell. And that crowd goes nuts thinking Luger won the title. But of course, what a lot of people may not have noticed at first glance was how this man in a suit was grabbing the referees, trying to get the referees' attention during all this. Storyline had it, the Maryland State Athletic Commissioner was right there, claimed Lex Luger was bleeding too profusely, telling the referee to stop the match. Which, when that announcement was made, that's what happened, that Ric Flair was the winner and still champion, barely a drop of blood coming out of Lex Luger's head. That was the first time where they really cut this man's legs off, Lex Luger. Those fans were ready. I was ready. They wanted it so bad. And they did that. Now, you could understand that's something you do on house shows a lot, and we all know about the dusty finish. But when you start doing it on TV where people pay money to watch these pay-per-views, and that was hard. That was no good. That was no bueno. However, they still had a bit of lightning in the bottle because the Flair-Luger rematches across the country at house shows did really good business. And when you get to October, something happens where, unrelated, Sting and the Road Warriors are in a 6-man tag team match. Shortly after Blanchard and Anderson left for the WWF, and the Road Warriors turn on Sting, turn heel. And shortly after that, you had interviews on TV with Luger and Sting talking how they're a tag team now together. They're coming for the Road Warriors. And if I'm not mistaken, that was likely the original plan for Starrcade 88 would have been Luger and Sting versus the Road Warriors for the tag team title. But, we've heard a lot of stories about the Starrcade 88 main event, how Dusty wanted Rick Steiner to beat Flair in short order for the title. I don't know if that would have been the original plan. However, things shifted quickly to where Luger kind of went away from the Sting thing, and Dusty went into that spot, and then suddenly we're hearing it's Luger-Flair again in a rematch at Starrcade in December, the first one not held on Thanksgiving night, for the title in a rematch. And you're thinking, okay, great, awesome, that this is where they're going to do it. Okay. Yeah, they had that hiccup in July, really bad finish, but this has got to be the one now that he gets his rematch. And so we get to Starrcade, and Flair and Luger had a 38-minute match. Went back and forth. Great match, and fans are ready. Fans are ready for this. We're like, if I were a betting man, kid, back then, I would have thought for sure, yeah, this Luger's going to win this. I would have bet anything I've owned and been very confident I would have doubled it. So late in the match, and during the match, Flair's working over Luger's leg, right? So you can tell like Luger's limping a bit, but he gets Flair up in that torture rack. Fans are excited. This is it, finally, just like in July, but this one's going to happen. He's going to win the title right here. Has him up in the torture rack. He's close to the ropes, but Luger's injured leg gives out. Luger falls backwards. Flair lands on top of him into a pinning position, of course. Referee counts. Flair puts his feet up on the ropes. Referee counts 3. Flair wins. Now, I gotta tell you, I didn't watch this live, of course, but when I got that After magazine and saw the Starrcade results, and I read about this, and I was like, what? And that's where the second time they deflated this man. To this day, I still don't understand why they just couldn't pull that trigger for him. I even saw a recent interview with Jim Crockett with Conrad Thompson where he said at the time he never saw Luger as champion. It's so amazing because we all did. All those fans did. The viewers. We loved this guy. Like, this guy was cool. He was good. Lex Luger. Awesome name. But no, Flair wins that match. And then after that match and backstage interview, Flair tells Luger, "I'm done with you, pal. You're never getting another shot at this again." And, talk about a punch in the gut. If you're a fan of Luger hearing this, it's bad enough he loses twice to Flair. And now to be told you're never getting a shot again. Now, of course, this was December. 2 months later, Chi-Town Rumble 89, they put a little bit of spark back in Luger with this one where, if you remember, Barry Windham, he's around still. He's the U.S. champion. So Windham defends against Luger at Chi-Town Rumble for the U.S. title. And kind of like in a forgotten feud that never really got kickstarted after that turn a year prior, Luger wins the U.S. title, and those fans loved it, man. That was cool. It was awesome. Okay, hey, here's something, man. They're doing, he's not just falling by the wayside, at least, right? Luger becomes U.S. champion for a second time. He's looking good. He's having, starts a feud with Michael Hayes, leading into Wrestle War in May, where for some reason they had Michael Hayes, with the help of Terry Gordy, beat Luger for the U.S. title, which, again, you're kind of like, hey, all due respect to Michael Hayes, I love the Freebirds, but again, shortly after winning that U.S. title, they have him lose it to Michael Hayes. And you're like, all right, but then within a couple of weeks, they have Luger win the belt back on Worldwide Wrestling, so you almost gotta wonder, why bother doing that change? But anyhow, okay, so they get him some momentum back, but it's at this time that he's starting to show heel tendencies again, and gets put in a program with Ricky Steamboat, who is also a babyface. And at the Clash of the Champions in June, after Steamboat's match with Terry Funk, where you see Luger enter the ring and you're thinking he's going to help Steamboat after a post-match attack, but no, he attacks Steamboat, becoming a full-fledged heel again. And, as a kid, and I love Luger, I didn't like the bad guys, I like the good guys, right? And so it's kind of like, why does he have to turn bad now, right? So he goes through his feud with Steamboat, and, great match at the Great American Bash in July in a title defense where Luger wins by disqualification, playing a smarmy heel, a little bit of a scared chicken shit heel type thing too. So really starting to craft out more of a character too during this run, going into September's Clash of the Champions, where he beats a resurgent Tommy Rich at the time, right? Going into October's Halloween Havoc, the first ever Halloween Havoc in 89, where he defends against a newcomer in the NWA, Flying Brian Pillman. And Luger, using heel tactics, squeaks one out against Brian there. But during all this time, Luger's really developing well in the ring, wrestling good matches. And a lot of people say this was 1989, Lex Luger was his best work, right? And it's kind of hard to argue with that. And then Lex goes on to November's Clash of the Champions, where he has a face-off with Sting. And one thing I didn't mention earlier in the year, in March, after Luger turning, a year prior, Sting and Luger won the Crockett Cup shortly after the Wyndham turn, right, in a makeshift tag team. So they had already established themselves as best friends throughout this time up until now. But in 89, Luger attacks Sting at the he attacks Sting, and then Sting gets right back in his face. And they start a little mini feud, and this is like, these are the two future guys that PWI was saying that are going to take who's going to win the world title first, Sting or Luger, right? And me, I like Sting, but I was a Luger guy. So they get into it a bit at November's Clash of the Champions, leading to Starrcade 89, where they had the Iron Man tournament, a round robin with Flair, Luger, Sting, and the Great Muta on a point system. 20 points for a pinfall or submission, 15 for a count-out win, 10 for a DQ win, and 5 points if it's a draw. Of course, 0 points to the loser. Now, while Sting won this tournament with 40 points, Luger was actually the only guy in this round robin that didn't lose a match. He pinned Sting, beats Muta by DQ, and has a time limit draw with Flair. But he still fell 5 points short of Sting, who had 40 points, 2 pinfall wins and 1 loss, right? So while not winning the tournament, they positioned him as the strongest guy actually in there, because like I said, he didn't lose a match. And then you get into early 1990, where he's still in his heel run. He's getting ready to prepare for a U.S. title defense at Wrestle War in February against Dr. Death Steve Williams. Now, this is where a bit of tragedy strikes Sting, where he's gearing up for a match with Flair himself for the NWA World title at the same Wrestle War, where, as we've all been led to believe, Sting was going to beat Flair at Wrestle War for the NWA World title. However, a few weeks prior at the Clash of the Champions, as we all know, Sting injures his knee severely in a post-match brawl with Ric Flair after the Horsemen turned on him, which led to him not being able, of course, if I'm not mistaken, he tore his left patella tendon, which would have required him to be out for 4 months. Now, of course, what to do with Wrestle War's main event now? So Luger, a heel, I guess they decided to go with him against Flair. What happens, of course, now, Luger being a heel, they had to come up with a storyline quick where he was given the title shot as the U.S. Heavyweight Champion and automatic number 1 contender. So Flair and the Andersons, who were back, of course, getting rid of Sting, they didn't want any challenger. So they politely go to Lex saying, hey, get out of this match. We'll buy you some time, but don't be a part of this. Just go out and do your thing. Luger, of course, when he made his decision, while still a heel, remember, tells Ole Anderson, I don't need 5 minutes. I don't need 50 minutes to make my decision. I got my decision for you here right now. And he whacks him with a punch, effectively turning babyface on short notice. Of course, this wasn't the plan, but with Sting's injury, they were scrambling and had to come up with a big main event for Wrestle War. So Luger, the U.S. champion, goes into Wrestle War for the world title. And now as a fan, you're thinking, okay, maybe this is it here. He's finally going to win the title, right? Fans are behind him solidly. He's doing this good thing for Sting. And during the match, even Sting comes out in crutches to cheer Luger on. And even grabbing Luger when he's draped over the middle ropes in exhaustion, he grabs Luger by the ears and he says, come on, get in there and kick his you-know-what. Smacking him in the face to wake him up, and Luger, almost like his way of hulking up, looks at Sting, takes a chop from Flair, looks back at Sting, takes another chop from Flair, and gets the advantage. And things are looking great. Sting is cheering him on with his leg all bandaged up, crutches on, and the fans are going nuts there in Greensboro. And you're thinking, hey, this is it. And the Andersons come out to attack Sting at ringside while Luger has Flair in the torture rack. Referee waiting for that, yes, I give up, I submit signal from Flair. But Luger, as he sees his old friend Sting in crutches getting attacked by the Andersons, he lets go of Flair, runs out of the ring, goes after the Andersons in defense of his friend. All the while, the referee is counting. Makes a 10 count. Luger gets counted out. Flair retains. And it's heartbreaking. But you can see, me watching as a kid and seeing, hey, this guy, he gave up the world title to help his friend. It was a bittersweet pill to swallow, but to see the good out of that, it kind of made up for it a little bit, I guess. So Flair retains, but we have Luger back as full-fledged as a babyface, helping his friend. And a little bit of time passes there. Of course, Sting is still out, and Capital Combat 90, a few months later in May, they sign a rematch, Flair versus Luger, but this time in a steel cage where there could be no interference, no disqualifications, no countouts. They even used the Halloween Havoc cage for this match, which didn't have a roof on it, but the best I can describe it would be kind of similar to the placement of today's current Hell in a Cell cage. And so you're thinking, okay, this is probably, this has to be it. How is Flair going to beat Luger? No horsemen are allowed to get in there. There's no way. And during this event, this is Capital Combat, the return of RoboCop, where they actually had RoboCop on the show. And of course, it was a promotional tie-in with the release of the RoboCop 2 movie. Kind of weird, but hey, you do these cross promotions, try to get your name out. I totally get why companies do this. It makes sense. So during this match, you start to see the Horsemen come out. Ole Anderson, Sid Vicious, Arn Anderson, Barry Windham is back as a Horseman. They're all scrambling outside the cage trying to find a way to get in, but of course they can't, and you can't climb it. It's way too high. But of course, somehow Ole Anderson gets a hold of the remote control that lifts the cage. And as Luger has Flair in the torture rack again, somehow the cage is lifted. Barry Windham runs in and attacks Luger. And the referee calls for the bell. Yeah, a disqualification in a cage match. A disqualification in a cage match. Flair retains. Sting comes out with RoboCop, El Gigante to even the odds, get rid of the Horsemen. But again, for the fourth time on pay-per-view, Luger fails to beat Ric Flair for the world title. Now, of course, as we all know, Flair didn't want to lose the title to Luger. He had promised it to Sting. And that would happen 2 months later in July at the Great American Bash, where Sting was back from his injury and he beats Flair to win the world title. On that card, Luger, remember, Luger's still the U.S. champion throughout all this, but you'd barely know it because he's feuding with Flair, the world champion. Luger at the Great American Bash successfully defends his title against Mean Mark Callis, who we would all know now as The Undertaker. So Luger's going through the motions in 1990, gets to Halloween Havoc where he defends the U.S. title against Stan Hansen. Now, mind you, Luger's already been the U.S. champion for June, July, I believe 15 or 16 months at this time. So at Halloween Havoc 1990, in a Texas Lariat match against Stan Hansen defeats Luger to win the U.S. title. So, but, hey, Stan Hansen was well known around the world. Like, this was no pushover, of course, so it was believable, which led to a little feud between them, where 2 months later at December Starrcade, Luger Luger loses the title in a normal match to Hansen, not a Texas Lariat match, pardon me, but at Starrcade, they have a Texas Lariat match, where the first guy to drag the other to the four corners wins, and Luger wins his title back. I always remember that ringside interview with Luger right after that, winning that U.S. title again against Hansen at Starrcade, and he screams out, "Oh, baby, how good it feels!" And just so enthusiastic of winning that U.S. title a fourth time. And yeah, I mean, I'm a Luger fan. Sting's the world champion at the time. But it's good to see him happy, right? He's doing well for himself at the very least. Although, man, they really cut this guy off. 4 pay-per-view losses to Flair, where he couldn't get the job done. Seemed to be a lifetime U.S. champion at this point. But hey, second place is pretty darn good, right? So we get into 1991, where he defends the title against Dan Spivey at Super Brawl in February. He wins, and after the match is asked to come to a podium to be presented a new version of the U.S. title by the company and by a returning Nikita Koloff. As you remember, Luger beat Koloff in 1987 for his first U.S. title. So as Nikita Koloff removes this nice brand new championship belt from a briefcase, about to present to the Luger, and he sure did present it to him all right, and he whacked him right on the head with it, starting off a feud. Luger-Koloff, so which made sense because Koloff is back for revenge. 5 years prior he was screwed out of this title by this guy, and he's back as a heel, menacing, shaved head again, the Russian Nightmare. So Luger gets into it with Koloff. Not a whole lot on TV. It was more of a house show thing, because even in just a few months later in May at the first ever Super Brawl, WCW signs this super tag team title match where the champions, the Steiner brothers, defend against Sting and Luger, all 4 friends. And I'm telling you, that was a fantastic match. The Steiners retain when Koloff interferes and I guess he was going to hit Luger with, he's going to attack Luger, but then Luger, saved by Sting, ends up getting hit by the Koloff, which leads to a feud between Sting and Koloff, leaving Luger kind of without a feud. But they have a plan for Luger, because believe it or not, he's going to get another title match with Ric Flair at July's Great American Bash, but that was determined a month prior to Clash of the Champions, of course, where Luger defeats the Great Muta to become the number 1 contender to get that match at the Great American Bash. So the stage was set. Great American Bash 91, Legend versus Legacy, where world champion Flair against U.S. champion Lex Luger in a steel cage, and this is where they were finally going to pull the trigger on Lex. But as we all know, something happened along the way. This was the time where Flair was having his feud with company head Jim Herd, which led to Flair getting fired / quitting, taking the big gold belt with him over to the WWF, leaving the WCW championship vacant now. So yeah, Luger still does get his world title match, but they had to quickly come up with a scenario where it was going to be Lex Luger versus his old friend Barry Windham, the 2 top contenders, battling out in that cage, with the winner becoming the new WCW world champion. And at the end of that match, Luger, Harley Race comes out to ringside with Mr. Hughes. We don't know why. They're not connected with any of these 2 guys. They don't even interfere, but you can tell Race signals to Luger to give him the pile driver. Luger pile drives Windham, gets the 1-2-3, becomes the WCW World Heavyweight Champion, aligns himself with Harley Race, and effectively turning heel at the same time. And while it was great that Luger finally was the champion, it of course, for it not being Flair that he beat, and that whole scenario where he didn't even beat the champion, he didn't even get the big gold belt, because remember, Flair took that with him. They had to make this makeshift championship out of an old Florida heavyweight title that Dusty Rhodes had from FCW, a local Florida territory, a couple of years prior, while they made a new championship. And he was a double champion. Of course, now Luger was the U.S. champion, now the world champion. Of course, he relinquished the U.S. title. But hey, he was the world champion. He was a heel again, managed by Harley Race with his bodyguard, Mr. Hughes, a cool little entourage. And so, hey, you got to make the best of it, right? He's the champ now. He's finally getting that ball, not as a babyface, but a heel. So his first feud actually begins. It's with Ron Simmons. Now, in September's Clash of the Champions, they have a contract signing, Luger and Simmons, where Luger suggests Simmons would have a great role in his organization as a limousine driver, which sets off Simmons, and they get into a big brawl leading up to a big best-of-3 falls match at Halloween Havoc. Good match. Luger with Harley Race in his corner against Simmons with Dusty Rhodes in his corner. Simmons wins the first fall by pinfall. Luger's able to come back with a disqualification win in the second fall and a pinfall win in the third fall, retaining the title, leading into November's Clash of the Champions, where he defends the title against Rick Steiner. Decent match, but earlier in the show, Lex Luger came out of a mystery box that was presented to Sting, which he had been presented a few mystery boxes leading up to this with some gag gifts and everything, where he attacks Sting, injuring his knee, which leads to Sting losing the U.S. title later that night to Rick Rude. Luger himself, kind of starting a feud there with Sting, defends against Rick Steiner, as I said, winning the title, leading to December's Starrcade, where they have Battle Bowl. So a bunch of tag team matches where the winners of each tag team match would be entered into a 20-man battle royal at the end of the show to become the Battle Bowl winner. And the last two in the ring were Sting and Luger. And Sting eliminates Luger to win the match and sets off their feud, where it is scheduled for February of 1992. World champion Lex Luger versus his challenger Sting, his old best friend. Finally, the showdown between these two future superstars from 1988, the future rulers of the wrestling world, for a big main event match at the first ever Super Bowl. However, it is at this time that Luger is negotiating with Vince McMahon to possibly head to the WWF. Now, he would not be eligible to wrestle for the WWF until 1993, so instead he is able to become part of Vince's World Bodybuilding Federation at the time. So, of course, being on the way out, Sting wins the big match at Super Brawl, defeating Luger for the world title. And then you don't see Luger again in WCW. He shows up shortly thereafter on the WBF's weekly show, Body Stars, where he's still the total package. He even makes an appearance at WrestleMania 8, which to me was so cool because, again, I was a WWF guy. That was my company. Those are my guys. I wanted everybody good there. So when I saw Luger show up there, I was like, all right, yes, Luger's here now. We have Hogan, we have Warrior, Sid, Luger, Flair, Macho Man. Everybody's here. It's awesome. I didn't really know what was going on backstage with this whole WBF thing, but he makes his appearance and he's going to be at the WBF event. Unfortunately, that's the summer where he gets into that very bad motorcycle accident where he really wrecks his arm pretty bad. And if you read some stories, and he came pretty close to having to have his arm amputated, if I'm not mistaken. So that was some serious business, but that's where they installed the steel plate in his forearm for the repair. So kind of late. You don't see much from him anymore, obviously, right? The WBF is it's losing its steam. It pretty much goes out of business in 92. So Luger's just waiting until 1993 to make his WWF debut. So in the months leading up to January's Royal Rumble, Bobby Heenan comes out and says how he's going to unveil a new superstar who is beyond perfection. And this is in response to his anger towards Mr. Perfect for turning on the Heenan and Flair, going out on his own, becoming a babyface. So Bobby Heenan proclaims this man every week to be Narcissus, the man who is beyond perfection. Now, me, I had no access to the dirt sheets, nothing, but I thought to myself, well, this has to be Lex Luger, right? You know, I'm thinking, man, they're going to change his name to Narcissus. Like, come on, you know, like, thankfully that never happened, right? So you get to the Royal Rumble where Bobby Heenan he's behind this curtained off platform where he's ready to unveil Narcissus, and slowly that curtain comes up and you see a man with white boots, a white cape, and yeah, it is. Bobby Heenan blurts out, "Everyone, it's Narcissus Lex Luger." So thank God they said the name. And so you see the big screen behind him. It says Narcissist Lex Luger. So again, thankfully they didn't just name him Narcissus. But here is the gimmick, you know. He was beyond perfection and very in love with himself. Had to pose in front of a mirror, but hey, he was finally here, right? You know, they get him into a feud with Mr. Perfect, leading to WrestleMania 9, where Luger beats Mr. Perfect in his first big match, going around the horn, even starting a feud with Bret Hart to commence right after WrestleMania, after Hart lost the title to Yokozuna. So Luger and Bret are going around the horn at house shows. Bret usually winning, of course, you know, getting to the King of the Ring, where I thought Luger was going to win the King of the Ring tournament, right? You know, to me it made sense. Him and Luger in the final, where he, you know, do some heel moves and win the crown, but they have him go to a time limit draw with the then still undefeated Tatanka. So Flair's still doing this Luger's still doing this house show bit with Hart, and then suddenly they come up with this storyline where after Yokozuna defeats Hulk Hogan at that same King of the Ring event for the WWF Championship, where Yokozuna is going to celebrate destroying Hulkamania on the 4th of July by going on the board of the deck of the USS Intrepid just there in New York City in a body slam challenge where he'll challenge any American to body slam him. So this is not a televised event, but of course it's recorded. So this is 4th of July. A few athletes get into this, like some NHL players, some NFL players try to body slam him. Nobody can do it. The Steiners try. Crush tries. And when there's no one left, Randy Savage, who is emceeing this event, tries with all his might, but he can't slam Luger, or he can't slam Yokozuna. And as you're watching, you're thinking, hey, America has failed. Nobody can slam this guy. Hogan couldn't do it. He's not here. He's gone. And then all of a sudden, everyone sees off yonder in a helicopter approaching the scene. So everyone's watching this helicopter slowly land. And who comes out of this helicopter? It's a man in blue jeans wearing a skin-tight red, white, and blue stars and stripes shirt. It's Lex Luger, the Narcissist. He's walking towards the area. As he's walking there, Bobby Heenan's there. He kind of gets in his way, and Luger politely shoves him aside. Gets into the ring, cuts a promo on Yokozuna, gets in on this challenge, takes his shirt off, the last guy to give this a try, to come through for America. And he does it. He slams Yokozuna, effectively becoming a babyface. Narcissist no more. Fans go nuts there. And here you have your new big American muscular babyface, Lex Luger. Because at this time, Hogan's on his way out. And so it doesn't take long for them to announce that at SummerSlam in August, it'll be WWF Champion Yokozuna defending against the American hero Lex Luger. And to kick off the build to this, they put Lex Luger on a cross-America bus tour on this bus decked out, called the Lex Express, a call-to-action campaign where he stops at many cities throughout America, making appearances at radio shows, some sporting and public events, pushing patriotism in America, all to help give him moral support for his big match with Yokozuna at SummerSlam, where America was going to come through. And I'm telling you, I'm a teen at this time. And I'm watching this week by week, and I love Lex Luger. And I am so excited for this. I am so ready for Lex to beat Yokozuna, become the WWF champion. I'm telling you, every week, I could not wait every week for August 30 to come. I wanted so bad to finally see this happen, because as I was a Hogan guy, but I'm telling you, any big baby face that came out of that, I was always ready for this guy to be the next guy, right? I was ready to move on from. I loved Hogan, but I understood you had to move on. Or you had to get a new guy. You had to get a new Superman, and Lex Luger was this guy. And now, granted, he wasn't as charismatic as Hogan, but I love the guy. I don't care. I loved Lex Luger. You know, remember, cool name. So a couple weeks prior to SummerSlam, they do this contract signing at Monday Night Raw, where Jim Cornette appears on the WWF as the spokesperson for Yokozuna and Mr. Fuji, and lets Luger know that this contract for this match is a one-time shot only. Tells Luger, if you don't win the title, you're never getting another shot again. And I'm like watching this, and I'm like, big deal. You know, to me, this just put more proof that Luger is going to win. So we get to SummerSlam, and I'm ready. I'm so ready, everybody. Oh, I'm sure, and some of you were watching at the time, you were ready too, and you know it, admit it. So they get to the main event finally. I'm going through this 9-match card, which was a pretty good card. I enjoyed SummerSlam 93 very much, and we get to that main event. Big entrances for both guys. They sing the American national. They sing both the Japanese and American national anthems before the match starts, with both guys in the ring. Luger is told he has to wear a protective cover, of course, over his arm with the metal plate, which has been going on since he was the heel narcissist as well, right? So that was nothing new. So they have their match. Not a great match, but decent match with a thin, muscular guy against a big foreign menace, 500 plus pounds of Yokozuna. And they're going back and forth a bit, and you're getting to the climactic part of the match where Luger slams Yoko again. Cornette and Fuji try to interfere, but Luger knocks them down. Nothing's going to stop him. The fans are cheering. They're going nuts. We're all ready. And I'm a Canadian, but hey, I'm an American today, man. I'm ready. I'm all USA myself. Luger pulls down that forearm guard of his, that pad, goes off the ropes as Yoko's getting up from that body slam to nail him, whack him with that forearm to knock him out for that pin. Luger goes off the ropes, whack, slams Yokozuna. But something happens. Yokozuna, he falls down, but he falls down through the ropes out of the ring. And I'm not picking up on it at the time. But I see the referee. His count is at 5. Luger seems to be celebrating along with this count as it goes to 6 and 7, 8. Yoko's not moving. We get to 9. And then we get to 10. The bell rings. Lex Luger wins by countout. Now let me repeat that. Lex Luger wins by a countout. The referee raises his arms. Luger is celebrating jubilantly. The Steiner brothers come into the ring to celebrate with him. Tatanka, Macho Man Randy Savage. Now there's a cheer in the crowd, but let's face it, we're not stupid. You don't win titles on a countout. You don't win them on a disqualification. Balloons start coming down from the arena's ceiling. Confetti's in the air. The baby faces are parading Lex Luger around the ring while he's holding the American flag like he just won the title. Although he didn't. Now, I don't know if the disease, the plague that started with Jim Crockett Promotions, somehow got attached to Lex Luger, where the WWF's management decided, hey, let's cut him off at the legs right before he wins a world title too. I'm telling you folks, I'm watching this pay-per-view live. I can't believe my eyes. I'm thinking to myself, why the hell did this guy travel on a bus for well over a month across the USA just to win by countout? I had never felt so deflated in my life for much of anything. I'm so disappointed. And not only am I disappointed, I'm watching this celebration. And again, I'm a WWF guy. I don't want to badmouth the company ever, but I'm thinking to myself, what the hell are they celebrating about? What the hell is going on here? And I'm waiting for the company to just forget that countouts are, don't cause a title to not change hands. Maybe the ref's just going to grab the belt and just hand it to him. And they're going to play dumb and pretend that you can win on a countout now. The rules changed for all I know. Hey, no, that doesn't happen. And then the show ends. And I'm like, well, what can I do? Right? I watched the TV the next week where they have a sit-down interview with Luger where he talks about, how he's sorry he failed, but he knows in his heart he will become the champion one day. Even Jim Cornette, in the post-match interview, has to put Luger over, saying, thank God you won by countout, because I never thought somebody could take down Yokozuna like you did, Lex Luger, but you're never going to get a shot again, and you know that because you signed that contract. And I'm trying to book in my head what the heck is going on here. But then I realize, hey, a way for them to get out of the contract thing where he can't get another shot is, since they started earlier that year where the winner of the Royal Rumble gets a world title shot at WrestleMania, I thought to myself, oh, hey, maybe Lex will win it at the Royal Rumble, will win the Royal Rumble, and then they'd have no choice but to give him the title shot at WrestleMania. So I figured that's what would happen. I knew wrestling wasn't real, but I didn't have any dirt sheet information. I had no clue what those were. I had the After magazines, and they didn't tell you anything like this. So, but I'm just trying to think in my head, how are they going to do this? And that's what I thought. And that actually kind of was the plan. So, and as we all know, Vince made the call to hold it off at SummerSlam and try to build for a bigger win at WrestleMania for Luger, with this storyline where he's not allowed a title shot, which, you know, when you think back, it's a good storyline, actually, right? You know, if you can have the patience a bit and the bravery to do that. So we're all coming up to the Royal Rumble, and they have a storyline where Jim Cornette's protesting that Luger should not be allowed in the Rumble because of that stipulation where he can't get another title shot again. And he is overruled by President Jack Tunney. So the stage is set, right? And I'm going into the Royal Rumble, and I'm like, okay, you know, Yokozuna is defending against Undertaker in a casket match. But I'm thinking, okay, Luger's going to win this Rumble to get his redemption, to get that title shot and finally do that thing. So Yoko wins his casket match with a ton of help from the heels. Earlier that show is the match where Owen Hart turns on his brother Brett during a tag team match where they were going up against the current tag champs, the Quebecers. So in the Royal Rumble later that night, when Luger is called to the ring, he's immediately attacked by Mr. Fuji's henchmen, Tenryu and the Great Kabuki. They're trying as much as they can to not get Luger into that match so he doesn't win and get that rematch with Yokozuna. And then, but he gets through into the match. But then they even do a thing where they're not sure Bret Hart could make it to the match because his leg is injured from his brother's attack. So he comes out and gets to the match too. And fans are loving Bret at this time as well, of course. So we're in this Royal Rumble. Bret's in there. Luger gets his way in there. It gets to the final four where it's Luger, Bret, Shawn Michaels, and Fatu of the Head Shrinkers. And during the four-way battle, Shawn and Fatu get eliminated at the same time by Bret and Lex in opposite corners. And we're down to our final two, the top two babyfaces, Lex and Bret, and the fans are cheering. And me, I'm still like, Luger's going to win, has to be. I liked Bret very much, but I wanted Luger to get that title. I wanted him to get that moment. So Bret and Lex get into it. A little bit of back and forth punches there. And as they tangle each other near the ropes, they both, and I'm telling you, these guys did a masterful job of going over the top rope at the same time, and both their feet touching the floor at the same time. You can watch that replay over and over again, and you can't make a strong case for either one feet touch first. So there's a confusion here. Who won? Referees are conferring with each other, and the first announcement by Howard Finkel is that Lex Luger's the winner, and I'm like, yes. And then there's more arguing where Finkel then announces Bret Hart wins, and I was like, what? This doesn't make sense, right? Because to me, in my head, WrestleMania is Luger, Yokozuna, Bret, Owen. And then they decide both men have won the Royal Rumble because the referees can't decide. They can't decide who landed first. So now we're left with a dilemma. Who gets the WrestleMania 10 title shot against Yokozuna? So they come up with a scenario where at Monday Night Raw, a couple weeks after, there's a coin flip. Jack Tunney decides both men are getting a shot at WrestleMania. And I'm like, what? So they show the scenario that if Lex Luger, then they're going to have a coin toss. Luger and Brett to see who gets the first title shot of the night against Yokozuna. So the scenario has it out that if Lex Luger wins the coin toss, he will wrestle Yokozuna, and so that Bret Hart has suitable, fair competition and doesn't get to go in fresh against Loki. He has to have a match too, which would be against his brother Owen Hart. Now, win or lose, Bret would then face the winner at the end of the night of whoever's the champion out of the Lex Luger-Yokozuna match. And then the other scenario is if Bret wins the coin toss, he gets the first title shot with Yokozuna, and Luger's suitable competition match would be against Crush. And then Luger would wrestle the winner of Yoko Bret. I was wanting for that scenario to happen, even though it didn't really make sense, because it's not like Luger was feuding with Crush. The first scenario made sense, where it would be Luger versus Yokozuna, and Bret would fight Owen, because then at least you get a payoff for that breakup of the two brothers. But then I realized, hey, if Lex beats Yoko, he's going to fight Bret at the end. Well, that would be a great match too. You know? So they do the coin toss, and Lex wins the coin toss, of course. So he gets the first match at WrestleMania against, he gets the first title shot with Yokozuna. And Bret will fight Owen earlier. Again, that made the most sense. And then I'm thinking, hey, then they're going to have the main event. It'll be Luger versus Bret. Awesome, you know? So we get to WrestleMania, and I'm still thinking Luger has to win. He has to beat Yoko. Bret gets the first match on the card against Owen Hart. Fantastic match. And they actually have Owen Hart go over, beats Bret. But that made me wonder, man, are they going to have Bret lose twice? Because I'm still thinking, okay, Luger's going to win the title. He's going to come out of this as champ. Has to be. So then they get to Luger's title shot with Yokozuna, the rematch from SummerSlam, Mr. Perfect, the special guest referee. And again, I'm ready. I'm ready for Luger to win this title, to be the WWF champion. And during the match, Mr. Perfect showing heel tendencies as a referee, refusing to count a pinfall for Lex, being too distracted with Mr. Fuji, not turning around. Lex, in frustration, grabs grabs Mr. Perfect's shoulder, say, hey, what are you doing? Come on. And Mr. Perfect, after being touched on the shoulder, decides, I'm going to disqualify you. You can't touch a referee. Ringing the bell. And once again, Lex Luger gets cut off at the legs. Yoko wins by disqualification, goes on to defend against Bret later that night, and Bret Hart wins the title. He's the chosen one. He's chosen over Luger. Already has a homemade number one contender in Owen Hart, who beat him earlier that night, kick off their summer feud. And Lex Luger comes out at the end of the night to have a slight stare down with Bret, shakes his hand, congratulates him. Now, I'm happy for Bret. I like Bret being champion, don't get me wrong, but I felt so sad for Lex. For myself, too. I was at a loss, because to me, Bret has to be the champ. Or no, Luger has to be the champ. They've done all this. They can't. So you're thinking this is going to play off to a feud, I guess, with Mr. Perfect, which is the plan. But almost as soon as they start that storyline, Perfect leaves again for whatever reason. I guess he's not really ready to get back into the ring. I don't know. So they just convert that to a Luger feud with Crush. Which, again, it's not the world title program. It's very mid-card, and it just feels like you're watching it as if Lex is falling out of favor. Going down the card, it's depressing to watch as a Luger guy. They start a storyline where Tatanka is accusing Lex of taking money from the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase, claiming that Lex is turning his back on America, that he's going to join DiBiase, and Lex is denying this. And, you know, they do these shots where you see DiBiase coming out of Lex Luger's locker room. Lex Luger defending himself, saying, hey, this is America. Everyone's got freedom of speech. DiBiase has every right to offer me something if he wants to. Just like I have every right to refuse it. And I did. But Tatanka's not buying it. Leading to a lot of frustration between the two. Luger defending himself and his pride and dignity. Tatanka, a babyface, accusing him week after week, leading up to where they set up a babyface match at SummerSlam in August of '94, Lex Luger versus Tatanka, where Tatanka says, I'm going to expose you that night for the traitor and turncoat that you are. You're not fooling me. You might fool America, but you're not fooling me, Lex. I know you've sold out. And I'm thinking to myself, I hope not. I don't want him to be a bad guy again. And stuff. So we get to SummerSlam. I was still naive at the time. I don't even realize that this is a play for Tatanka be the one that turns heel. And in that match, Ted DiBiase appears at ringside, distracting Luger, and Tatanka rolls him up for a quick 1, 2, 3. Luger loses another big match. Then after the match, Tatanka reveals that he is the one that has joined the $1 Million Corporation, attacks Luger after the match, and Luger's left beaten. And you just feel his star fading at this point. Not because of him, but just because nobody's pulling the trigger on this guy. This guy who, and yeah, he was WCW champion there for a bit in 91, but it just seemed to be by default. He didn't beat Flair. Who else were they going to put it on, right? And that just leads him into a feud with Tatanka going into the Survivor Series in November, where Luger leads a team, the All-Americans against the $1 Million Corporation, 5-on-5 elimination match. It's Luger, Adam Bomb, Mabel, and the Smoking Guns against Tatanka, Bam Bam Bigelow, King Kong Bundy, and the Heavenly Bodies. And it gets to a point in the match where after the eliminations, it's Luger alone on his side against Tatanka, Bigelow, and Bundy, 3-on-1. And I'm thinking, okay, hey, Lex is going to come back strong here. He's going to come back down from this deficit, beat these guys, and win this match. And maybe they'll build him up again, right? You know, who knows, right? So as he's down 3-1, he's battling Tatanka, and he's tired. But he sneaks in a small package on Tatanka. 1, 2, 3, eliminates Tatanka. And I'm thinking, okay, he's going to get through Bundy and Bam Bam Bigelow. Almost as soon as he hits that pin on Tatanka, out of nowhere, Bundy splashes him. Referee, 1, 2, 3. Bundy pins Luger. Now, Bundy has his place in pro wrestling history, but at this point, he was well beyond his prime. And I'm like, come on. I'm watching this. Jeez. Like, Bundy pins him? So they all attack him after the match. And his partners come back out to help him. But again, they're just beating him all the time in these big matches, right? He's not getting his comeuppance, or he's not getting his revenge for anything. He has this big match with Tatanka early in 1995 on Monday Night Raw. Well, actually, first let's get to the Royal Rumble in January, where Diesel is the world champion. And even though, to me, I'm getting really good at connecting the dots here. I'm like, well, okay, seems like Shawn Michaels is probably going to win the Royal Rumble. He's going to get the shot against Diesel because he used to be his bodyguard. But I still wanted Luger to win. And Luger's in the Final Four. And I'm thinking, oh, maybe it'll be Luger versus Diesel. Yeah. Naive young me. Hoping. Because I love Luger. He's my guy. Right? Hogan's in WCW now. The enemy. Screw them. Luger's the new Hogan. He's the best. So as he's in the Final Four of the Rumble, he's on the turnbuckle, pounding down on Crush. And out of nowhere, Shawn Michaels flies across the ring, axe handles Luger across the back, which makes Luger fall over the top rope, eliminated. And I'm like, shit, So much for that. A few weeks later, he has what's a big blow-off match with Tatanka on Monday Night Raw. Fun match. Well, I thought it was the blow-off match. It wasn't. I figured that would be at WrestleMania 11, I guess, right? But he beats Tatanka by count-out in this big match on Monday Night Raw. Still not definitive, but looks strong, right? Tatanka runs away and stuff like that. So then suddenly as they're announcing the card for WrestleMania, Lex gets on the card, but it's in a tag team match teaming with the British Bulldogs against these newcomers, Jacob and Eli Blue, who we'll know later as the Harris Twins, 8-Ball and Skull. And I was like, okay, well, they decide to have the big blow-off match with Tatanka a week prior on the USA Network special Sunday Night Slam in a steel cage, where Luger does definitively beat and conquer Tatanka, doesn't escape the cage to win, but pins Tatanka in that cage match. And I'm like, hey, good, at least he didn't lose this feud, right? Goes on to WrestleMania, the opening match. Him and Luger beat the Jacob and Eli Blue. Later on that card, Owen Hart has a mystery partner for a tag team title match with the Smoking Guns. And his partner is the returning Yokozuna, who had been gone since losing a casket match to The Undertaker at Survivor Series. They win the tag team title. So I'm thinking, hey, Luger, Bulldog, Yoko, Owen, the crossovers are good. Luger's history with Yokozuna, Bulldog, Owen Hart, brothers-in-law always at each other's throats. And I'm thinking, hey, it's not the world title, but they're going to have Luger and Bulldog beat Owen and Yoko for the tag team title. That's the plan. It's got to be, right? And they begin that feud going, and of course, it's a house show thing, so they don't have, Luger and Bulldog, they don't have a match at In Your House in May. They're not even on the King of the Ring in June. But they schedule a tag team title match in July of 95 at In Your House. Owen and Yoko against the Allied Powers, Lex Luger and the British Bulldog. And to me, it was obvious that Luger and Bulldog were going to win the tag team title, right? And I'm ready for it. Hey, Diesel's the world champion. Shawn Michaels wins the Intercontinental title at that show. It's going to be fun, right? Hey, Luger and Bulldog, tag team champs. Hey, Luger gets some gold finally, right? And they'll build him back up eventually to be the world champion, right? I still am certain of this in my mind at the time. So we get to that tag team title match, and I'm ready for a tag team title change. Again, I would have bet anything I owned and would be certain I'd double it that Luger and Bulldog were going to win. So we get into the match, and it's going back and forth. Then late in the match, all four are in the ring together, battling each other, and then it gets to a point where Luger's at the advantage with Yokozuna, but somehow, Luger is going for a pin on Yokozuna, but Owen comes off the ropes and smashes onto Luger to break the pin, which puts Luger on his back, and I'm not thinking much about it. It's just a heel breaking up a pin. After this happens, Owen tackles Bulldog out of the ring, and suddenly Yoko gets up and drops this mega leg drop right on Luger's face. And I'm watching this and I'm like, no. Covers Luger, hooks his leg, referee, 1, 2, 3. And I'm like, what? Luger just gets pinned right there, squashed. And I'm thinking, what? Again, how many times do I got to think this, folks? And if you're listening still, how many times have I got to wonder, what's going on? Why? Yoko and Owen win. Next month is SummerSlam, so I'm hoping that there's going to be a rematch. You know, maybe they'll do it at SummerSlam, right? As the weeks are coming up, they never announced a tag team title match at all. I mean, they've already announced 9 matches for this show. Then you get to Monday Night Raw, 2 weeks before SummerSlam on August 14th. Oh no, actually, sorry, August 21st. Taped on the 14th, where early in the show, Men on a Mission come out, win a squash tag team match, and then get on the microphone. And King Mabel, who's going to be wrestling Diesel at SummerSlam for the world title, claims they're the best. Men on a Mission is the best tag team in the world. Allied Powers, I know you're in the back. Come out here right now and face us. And then immediately says, yeah, I thought you wouldn't. Long live the king. And the Allied Powers aren't even there, I guess, right? So you're thinking, like maybe they're going to set up a feud with the Allied Powers. Because to me, there's no way Mabel's winning the title anyway against Diesel, right? So, but they still never announced a tag team title match. So later on that Monday Night Raw, while Diesel's having an in-ring interview talking about his upcoming defense against Mabel at SummerSlam, out of nowhere, the British Bulldog comes into the ring and interrupts, politely saying, Diesel, my partner Lex Luger is not here. He's back on an emergency leave in Atlanta, but I want to answer that Men on a Mission challenge. How about you and I team tonight and you can get your hands on Mabel before SummerSlam? And Diesel is all for this. So they make the match right then and there. Diesel and the British Bulldog against King Mabel and Sir Mo of Men on a Mission. That match gets going. It's happening. And in the middle of the match, Diesel in the ring with both Men on a Mission. Bulldog comes in to even up the odds. But suddenly Bulldog nails Diesel with a clothesline, effectively turning heel. And Bulldog, with Mabel and Mo, the three of them attack Diesel, leaving him for dead. And I'm wondering, what's going on? Where's Luger? Like, what's Luger's thing in all this then, right? I did not see this coming. There's just the thought of Davey Boy Smith being a bad guy or a heel was just, I could not picture that. He was one of my favorites too. Like, I loved the British Bulldogs growing up. They were my guys. I loved them more than I loved Hogan, right? So I'm kind of like, that sucks. Like, so SummerSlam comes. We don't hear from Luger, nothing, right? But during the pre-show of SummerSlam, I think it was Todd Pettengill was backstage saying, I have gotten word that the Lex Luger's on his way to the arena. We wonder what's his deal with this whole Bulldog thing. Like, they're still kind of like leaving the impression that he's still friends with Bulldog and he's on Bulldog's side. Maybe he's turned as well. We don't know what's going on. So Bulldog's not even at SummerSlam at all. So we get to the main event, Diesel versus King Mabel for the world title. And as Diesel is facing a deficit, with Mo's interference, suddenly out of nowhere, Lex Luger shows up to run into the ring while Diesel is being double teamed with the referee knocked out by both Men on a Mission. But right as he gets in the ring, Diesel immediately sees him and goes right at him and clotheslines him right out of the ring. And now they're playing into the story that Diesel doesn't know where Luger stands. Like, his partner just attacked me a couple weeks prior. He's probably out here to get me too. So he clotheslines Luger out of the ring. And Vince on commentary saying, hey, he doesn't know where Luger lies. So as the battle goes on outside, Luger's still down. Mabel and Diesel get back into the ring while Mo's still on the outside. You see Luger get up. And what does he do? He comes up and attacks Mo to help even the odds. No, he hasn't turned heel. He hasn't turned against you, Diesel, as well. He's here to help you. And I'm like, yeah, okay, nice, good. Luger gets rid of Mo. Diesel defeats Mabel, retains the title. Fantastic. And I'm like, okay, hey, Luger, like, what's going on here? He's probably going to feud with Davey Boy here. And of course, in my mind, he's going to feud with Davey Boy. He's going to beat him. He's going to make his way back to a world title shot and win the title eventually. Who knows? But then we never see Luger again in WWF. I remember a week after that SummerSlam, at the end of WWF Superstars on September 2nd, 1995, as Vince and Doc Hendricks were going over the lineup of who's going to appear on the show next week, one of the last screens they show us is just Lex Luger, and you hear Vince McMahon say, and next week, Lex Luger speaks. We're going to hear from Lex Luger. And Doc Hendricks saying, yeah, it'll be good to see what he says about this whole situation with the British Bulldog. I can't wait to see this. Now, the night after SummerSlam, there was no Monday Night Raw on because it was preempted for 2 weeks due to the U.S. Open tennis. So Raw was not scheduled to come back on the air until September 11th. They actually taped footage the night after SummerSlam. They did the Raw and Superstars tapings in Canton, Ohio, where they did record this interview. And in this interview, apparently, which has never seen TV, because when they announced that on Superstars on September 2nd that Lex Luger would speak next week, 2 days later, Lex Luger shows up as a shock on the very first ever WCW Monday Nitro. The big show that they created to go head to head with the WWF's Monday Night Raw and really kick in this war with each other. Now, of course, I didn't have satellite at the time. I didn't know this happened because I was not able to see Nitro live, right? And remember, I'm in Canada. There's no WCW and RTVs here in Alberta, right? So I'm waiting to see that interview. But I find out while we do have TBS in Alberta, we didn't subscribe, but I can listen to TBS because it was scrambled. So I remember listening to I think it was WCW Pro early Saturday morning on September 9th, that same day where the Superstars would be on TV later that afternoon, and I'd see that Luger interview. And I'm listening to WCW Pro, and they're talking about how Lex Luger showed up at the first ever Monday Nitro. And I was like, what? And so many thoughts are going through my head, guys. I'm thinking, stupidly, the first thought that comes to my mind is, are the two companies crossing over and working together? Is he in both? Like, so I'm waiting. I can't wait to watch Superstars that day to see that interview where he's going to talk about Bulldog and whatever. Superstars comes and goes. They don't mention that interview at all. Now, as I was about to say, they did record this interview. Like the night after SummerSlam at the tapings in Canton, Ohio, Luger talked about, apparently, Luger did that interview with Vince, and as he was about to explain everything with Bulldog, King Mabel interrupted the interview saying, "You cost me my match against Diesel, the title at SummerSlam," challenging Luger to a match for next week on Superstars, which would have been on the 16th of September. And they taped that match that night where Luger beats Mabel by disqualification after Bulldog interferes, and Bulldog and Mabel and Mo all attack Luger, leaving him laying in the ring. We never get to see any of this air, because Luger has gone back to WCW on that first Monday Nitro. He shows up right before Sting's match with Ric Flair, and then later on that night, after Hulk Hogan defeats the Big Bubba Rogers, he helps Hogan stave off an attack from the Dungeon of Doom, and talking about how he's been playing for kids for long enough. I'm ready to play with the big boys, and challenges Hogan to a world title match, which Hogan accepts to take place the very next week on the second Monday Nitro on September 11. Now, at this point, I'm a very strong WWF follower. I'm kind of becoming anti-WCW because I'm hating all these pot shots that they're taking at the WWF. I liked them just fine when they just did their own thing and there was no pot shots. But when those pot shots started, I started to become a bit of a hater. I still watched, but so, guys, I'm not happy that Luger's not in the WWF anymore. He left my team. I wanted him to be WWF World Champion. I didn't want him going back to WCW. I'm literally so heartbroken about this. I don't like it. Now, he gets his match with Hogan at the second Monday Nitro. It's a schmoz, a run-in with the Dungeon of Doom. So a disqualification where, and at this point, this is leading up to War Games, WCW Fall Brawl, where it's supposed to be Hogan, Sting, Savage, and Vader against the Dungeon of Doom. But at this time, Vader runs into his troubles with WCW where he gets fired. So Luger's there, and they come up with an angle after that Hogan-Luger match on Nitro, which they just give away on free TV. Barely any build-up. I mean, you could have built that up for a huge pay-per-view, first time ever. But you get why they do it. They're trying to make Nitro a thing, and they are. They succeed. So Luger, against Savage's wishes, is allowed by Hogan to take Vader's spot on the team. Savage is not happy with this, so there's always tension with Savage and Luger. Even during the War Games match, Savage and Luger get into it with each other. Hogan's team wins, of course, leading to a little feud with Luger and Savage the next few weeks on Monday Nitro, where they're wrestling each other on Nitro. Again, Nitro is giving away so many big main event matches, first time ever's on free TV. Even one match in October Nitro where Luger stipulates that if I don't beat you, Savage, I'll leave WCW. Already, he just came back, so I'm thinking, hey, please Savage win so he can go back to WWF. But no, Luger wins. And then Halloween Havoc 95, at the end of Hulk Hogan's match against the Giant, in Giant's debut match for the WCW title, Luger jumps in and attacks Hogan, where he turns heel, joins the Dungeon of, well, not joining the Dungeon of Doom, kind of, but joining Jimmy Hart at least. Or early on that show, Luger loses to Savage in Halloween Havoc. So I'm thinking, man, they're beating him here too, right? Like, it's whatever. So I'm thinking, hey, he's going to feud with Hogan, right? Okay, maybe that. But no, that never really materializes. He just kind of continues on a feud with Savage constantly through World War III. He's managed by Jimmy Hart while maintaining a friendship with Lex Luger for some reason. So that was pretty cool. You know, he's a heel, but him and Luger are still friends, and they're still fighting other heels in the Horsemen. Starrcade, Luger, Sting, Flair wrestling a three-way match. With the winner getting a shot at Savage later that night, won by Flair. So Luger's kind of just humming along here. Although a cool thing in January, Luger and Flair get a tag team title shot on Monday Nitro against Harlem Heat, and they win the title. Luger, funny, actually winning by using a roll of quarters and trying to hide the fact from Sting that he just cheated to help them win. So it was a cool dynamic between the two, because Flair, Luger loves Sting, but he's a heel, and Sting's kind of like, come on, man, stop doing this stuff type thing. Pleads him to get away from Jimmy Hart, which, Luger eventually does. After winning the TV title from Johnny B. Bad, he suddenly, they have to do a turn, right? Because the fans are liking him. He's teaming with Sting, so he tells Jimmy Hart suddenly he's, after Uncensored, I am no longer going to require your management and everything. So effectively, just kind of being a babyface again, being the TV champion, being a tag team champion with Sting. And of course, this is the time where the big things happen, where Kevin Nash, Oral Diesel, and Razor Ramon leave the WWF to come to WCW as themselves, the Outsiders. And which become the formation of the NWO. So the big tag team, 6-man tag team match at Bash at the Beach, of course, the Outsiders, and their third mystery guy against Sting, Lex Luger, and Macho Man Randy Savage. Luger gets knocked out in the middle of the match, and you're thinking he's going to be the third guy, right? Coming back later, but no, it's Hogan. Hogan does the big heel turn. We all know that story, but hey, but this is about Lex Luger. So, and right before the Bash at the Beach, Luger and Sting lost the tag team title back to Harlem Heat during a big interference of Nash and Hall too. So he's still the TV champion. So, and geez, and I forgot, I totally overwent this, but even a month prior to the Great American Bash, Luger gets a title shot against the Giant, who's the WCW champion, who beats Luger. And I didn't expect Luger to win. I mean, yeah, I'm always hoping, but the Giant's booked pretty strong. He's huge. It makes sense. So, which leads into that Bash at that Beach, that big 6-man tag I just mentioned. Then we go next month, August, to Hog Wild, where Luger and Sting as a tag team take on the Outsiders. And of course, the Outsiders win. They have to win. Pinning Luger in the process, of course, as always, because Luger is always the one taking the damn pins for everything. But even then, I still want him back in WWF. My heart's not into it as much as it used to be. But one big thing they did with Luger is, come December 96, he's the first guy to get a big win against an NWO guy in a match against the Giant, who had joined the NWO in September. And they're just running over everyone and winning everything. Hogan is the world champion. The Outsiders are the tag team champions. They now have the Giant. DiBiase is managing them. Six is there, but even Bischoff, the company head, is a part of the NWO. Eric Bischoff. But Luger beats the Giants in December Starrcade. So the very first big WCW win against the NWO, and the fans are loving that. Even I'm watching, I'm feeling the energy here, right? This is good, and that that leads to the Giant being dumped by the NWO for not helping Hogan and win against Piper later that night. So Giant and Lex Luger joined forces to become a tag team to battle the Outsiders at Super Brawl in February of 97. But before that match, Luger has an injured arm and he's told he can't wrestle against doctor's orders. So Giant goes at it alone. But during the match, Luger shows up and joins the match. The referee lets it go on, and Luger gets into the match, a tag in with his arm wrapped, gets Kevin Nash in a torture rack backbreaker, and Nash submits. Luger and Giant are the tag team champions. I'm like, wow, nice, And Luger's looking strong, eh? Fans are really behind him. But then, of course, Bischoff, being the heel company head, overturns the decision the next night, gives the tag titles back to the Outsiders, because remember, Luger was not allowed to participate due to his arm. So he had no right being in the match. Ends up firing the referee over it too, in a really good angle. Referee Randy Anderson, where he's fired in front of his wife and kids. go on to Uncensored in a big NWO WCW elimination match where NWO wins again. April, 4-way match, Luger Giant versus both members of Harlem Heat, where the winner gets a future world title shot. Hey, won by Lex Luger. And you're thinking, oh, okay, hey, good. Doesn't get his shot right away, but in June, at the very first Monday Nitro in Boston, Massachusetts, sold-out crowd, Luger challenges Hogan to a match, although it's not a title match. It's a non-title match, but it's official. They have a match. Luger puts Hogan in the torture rack. Hollywood Hogan, now the heel, world champion. Hogan submits. Luger wins. It's not a world title win, but hey, I'll give you WCW credit. They're doing a lot of old bad do stuff and really pushing Luger strong. They attack him after the match, of course, where it leads to an announcement that at Road Wild in August, it'll be Hollywood Hogan defending the world title against Lex Luger. However, 5 days prior, there's a big Monday Nitro in Auburn Hills, Michigan, sold out. It's promoted as the 100th Monday Nitro in a special 3-hour edition. And it is announced that even though there's a title match between Luger and Hogan at Road Wild, Hogan hasn't been defending his title in the allotted 30 days and everything, so they decide for that big 3-hour Nitro there prior to Road Wild that Luger will get a title shot there as well. So they have the stages set. They have this big main event match in that Monday Nitro, August 4th, 1997. And at this point, I am getting the Nitros live. I have a satellite dish. I'm able to watch TNT, USA Network, so I'm not having to find out about this after the fact, right? So I'm watching this. I watched Raw first because Raw, WWF is still my guy. They're my number one. WCW is the enemy, but I'm a wrestling fan. I got to watch everything. So they get to this match, and you kind of feel in the air, hey, is Luger going to win the title here tonight, hey? So they have the match. The NWO tries to interfere, but Luger fights them off. The referee's not ringing the bell for no DQ. None of this bull crap. Luger, just like in the June Nitro, Luger gets Hogan up in the torture rack. Referee's checking on him. And referee Randy Anderson turns around and signals the ringing of the bell. Hogan submits. Lex Luger just beat Hulk Hogan to win the WCW World Heavyweight title. The fans are going nuts. I'm even liking it, eh? Even though I want him to be in the WWF. I'm still hurt. The WCW guys run into the ring. There's a huge celebration in the ring. Luger overcame. This is the best Lex Luger had ever been booked in his career, where they finally gave this man his due. And it was perfect. It truly would. The only problem is, though, like this. They had been building up Hogan versus Sting for that whole year to be happening in a few months at Starrcade. Unfortunately, as good as this was for Luger, honestly, that kind of killed that whole momentum. Because Sting should have been the one to finally conquer Hogan. But they did this with Luger. It was for a ratings thing. It was for ratings. It was hot-shotting. It was awesome, though. Celebrating in the dressing room after the match, showing champagne flying. But hey, guess what, everyone? They still have a match at Road Wild in 5 days. On Saturday, the 9th of August, where now Luger is defending the title against Hogan. And, of course, NWO interferes. Hogan wins his title back. Lex is champ for a grand total of 5 days. I knew he'd lose it right back, too. Like, you still know Sting is the play for December Starrcade. But even then, it's like, it's kind of who cares now, right? Luger already beat Hogan clean twice. Geez, and I totally forgot to even mention July of 97, a month prior to Luger beating Hogan for the title, the big tag team main event is Luger and the Giant against Hogan and Dennis Rodman of the Chicago Bulls. And they had Luger submit Hogan in that tag team match. So Luger beats him in June, one-on-one non-title match. July, submits Hogan in the tag team main event at Bash at the Beach. Early August Nitro, submits Hogan to win the world title. He's made Hogan give up 3 times in a row in 2 months. And then loses the title back, of course, as we all saw. But who cares now about Sting versus Hogan? Yeah, it still does big business. People still want to see Sting come back, but the conquering has already been done. Luger was the conqueror. It was Luger. They still went through with their Sting thing, right? But Luger goes through the remainder of 97. Gets into a feud with Buff Bagwell. They have a match at Starrcade. Luger versus Bagwell. Or Bagwell, with NWO help, gets a pin on Luger. But they just do a rematch the very next night on Nitro where Luger beats him right back. So it's like, what's the point, right? But man, Luger's just back to where he is, where he's a strong guy, a top guy, but just get into 98 where he's getting matches with Savage again on that Sold Out where he wins. Gets into a little mini feud with Scott Steiner after Scott Steiner turned on his brother Rick to start his big Papa Pump persona. Still, but again, while Luger's still kind of feuding with the NWO, gets into a pretty cool little run where the NWO split in the late spring of 98, around June, where Kevin Nash splits off into his own NWO of the Wolfpack, where Luger becomes a part of, with Savage, Conan, even Sting. Sting, the big WCW savior, is now in the NWO's babyface Wolfpack, which broke off from the other black and white NWO of Hollywood Hogan, where he is with the Giant, who's back in the NWO. Brian Adams, Scott Hall, for some reason, not being in the Wolfpack with Nash, but you kind of get it, where, you got to have some strong guys on both sides, right? So there's a whole NWO warfare going from June, July, and August, where there's a battle royal Road Wild where it's NWO Black and Red, NWO Black and White, and Goldberg, which Goldberg wins. Rightfully so. He's the world champion at this point. He does another conquering of himself where he beats Hogan for the title in July. So Luger is a bit of a bit part. Kind of just going through the motions for the remainder of 1998 with, on the coattails of Kevin Nash, of that Wolf Pack, where Nash gets into his match with Goldberg at Starrcade. We all know what happens there. Then in January of 1999, there's that reunification of the NWO into one strong unit again, where it's the NWO Elite, the six, wearing the red and black now, where it's Hogan, Nash, Hall, Bagwell, Scott Steiner, and Lex Luger. So he's in it, but probably considered the fourth main guy of that whole group. So, but he's a heel, doing some heel work where he's paired up with Elizabeth now, who he's having a real life relationship with too. Goes into a feud where he's teaming with Nash that led to a tag team match with Conan and Rey Mysterio, where they defeat Mysterio and which forces him to unmask, right? But then Luger, I believe he gets injured a bit, goes away for a good chunk of 1999, where he comes back later in the year, reborn as just the Total Package. They actually don't even use the name Lex Luger anymore for a while there. So he's back as a heel on his own with Miss Elizabeth, the Total Package, where gets into a mini feud with Bret Hart, beating Bret at Halloween Havoc. This is when Vince Russo comes into WCW and putting comedy in every single storyline going on there. So Luger gets into a mini feud with Sting again, leading to a match at Starrcade between the two, where Sting wins by disqualification after a post-match attack by Luger. Then you go into the year 2000, where Hogan makes a comeback with the red and yellow, so he has a match with a little mini feud with Luger in February and March at Super Brawl and Uncensored, where Hogan beats him in a cage. Luger teaming up with Ric Flair in April in the tag team title tournament. And again, Vince Russo and Eric Bischoff now are in charge of WCW's creative, so they're all over the place. So Luger's teaming with Flair as a heel. Then suddenly, because they do the Millionaires Club against the New Blood, Luger is back to a babyface again, entering into a feud with a relative unknown young guy, Chuck Palumbo, who was taking on a Total Package persona himself, claiming to be better than Lex, even though he clearly isn't. He's not even built like Lex. They get into a little feud as well. And Luger falls out of favor with Vince Russo. Comes back later in the year after Russo is gone again, where he gets into a bit of a little feud with Goldberg, actually, which, they get into it for a leading into Starrcade. Goldberg versus Luger, December of 2000. And again, Luger's in and out at this point. The magic's gone, unfortunately. But in January of 2001, just 2 months prior to the death of WCW, he's involved in a match where, through nefarious means, he beats Goldberg, actually, and effectively ends Goldberg's career, because that's the stipulation. So, a bit of a boost to Luger there. He's put in a tag team with Buff Bagwell, where together they're called Totally Buff, and they're part of a big faction again called the Magnificent Seven, led by Ric Flair, with Jeff Jarrett, Scott Steiner, Road Warrior Animal, Buff Bagwell, Lex Luger. This big heel faction where they're mocking Luger every week. And then it gets into where Luger and Bagwell are getting a World Tag Team title shot against young champions Chuck Palumbo and Sean O'Hare at pay-per-view. One of the last two pay-per-views of WCW, where they do a clean job in like 10 seconds to these guys, which was really weird watching it, because, hey, it's a good way to build these young guys, but you just weren't expecting that. But for some reason, Luger and Bagwell, from what I've heard, this was their way of kind of getting back at the company a bit, were selling way too long after this, almost holding up the beginning of the next match to kind of put on a little display there. And as we all know, later that month, March 2001, WCW is purchased by the WWF. Nitro canceled, Thunder canceled. Lex Luger is not one of the contracts WWF decides to pick up. And this is basically it for Lex. And that's it. Gets into that issue a year or so later where while he's married, he's living a double life, living in another home as well with Elizabeth. And they're into drugs and alcohol, and that unfortunate incident happens with Elizabeth where she passes away, putting Luger in a bad light. It's not his fault, but, things happen in life when you get involved in stuff like that. And then, of course, things take a turn for Luger too, or, he does these independent companies like World Wrestling All-Stars, never gets back into the WWF. They don't want him. There's really no use for him anymore at this point. Ends up getting that spinal stroke, if I'm not mistaken, that has left him to this day mostly in a wheelchair. But he did turn his life around, thankfully. Turning to God, becoming saved. Providing a very good message to everybody. When you see him in interviews now, he's such a humble man, and it's such a pleasure to watch him speak and seeing what he has turned into, even, not being able to be the man he once was, going through so many physical difficulties. But he got some redemption earlier this year when he's inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. He's able to get off of his wheelchair with a lot of help from Diamond Dallas Page's DDPY yoga program, who has helped so many people, so many guys in the business too. And I can make a whole podcast of that. It was so nice to see him accept that nomination. Every time I scroll through X, I'll every few days see a post of him with a nice picture of the atmosphere, and he'll say, I believe, another day, thank you, Lord. Amen, Lex, another day, definitely. So that's the story of, condensed story of Lex Luger. Just almost tragic in a sense, because he could have been so much more, but I don't know what it was with these companies, just would not let him get over that hump. It's a shame. Could have been a whole different history there, but regardless, I've always been such a big fan of that guy, not just as a wrestler, but now as a man too. And so even though it didn't turn out as we liked, even though I'm still hurt he left the WWF in 1995, he's made his mark, and that man deserves his flowers. Anyhow, I'm going to leave it at that. I'm hoping you guys enjoyed this. I'm going to be coming back with more topics, giving you my point of view, how I was in my life with other things going on in the wrestling history. But before I do, I just want to give a shout out to some really great podcasters out there that I love listening to, and I want to give them a plug. And I mean, I'm just a little guy, but I want to pay my respects to these guys. Pro Wrestle Clips, run by Phil Marks, great podcast. This guy's on doing this solo, 3 live shows a week. Great insights. I suggest you guys tune into this guy. Look him up. Phil Marks, Pro Wrestle Clips, Pro Wrestle Times. You've got Marvin the Movie Monster every Tuesday. I believe he does a live stream at 8 o'clock Eastern. Funny guy, great insight too in wrestling. And you have other guys like Alt Jake. Look this up, Alt Jake. Look him up on X. Look him up on YouTube. Great guy. Look him up on Spaces on X. He's got a great show. Don Tony, and I believe the Squirrel Circle Maniacs every Thursday on YouTube at 7 o'clock Eastern. Look up these guys. Another great podcast, great insight. This is awful wrestling. Look him up. The Death of AEW. He also goes by. Another great show, another great podcast, such as The Lapsed Fan Wrestling Podcast, any Jim Cornette podcast. If you're not listening and you're a wrestling fan, you got to listen to these guys. Anyway, I'm going to leave it at that for now. Thank you all so much for being a part of this. If you're listening, I hope I can give something out to this podcast, Wrestling World, that you guys are going to want to tune into every week. This is my first go at it. I'm going to get better. I'm hoping you guys could put up with this one. Like I said, it's going to be rustic. So thank you so much for being a part of this. I'll see you again really soon. Keep tuned in to A Lifetime of Wrestling. Follow me on X. Follow me on YouTube. We'll see you again pretty soon. Take care.